I'm Felina.
And I'm Summer.
And you are listening to Broken Broken.
Because we're both.
The podcast about living your best life by getting real.
Hey, broken people. This is Summer.
And this is Felina.
And today we have Sarah. Sarah Adams-Cornell. How are you doing, Sarah?
Halito, I am good. I'm a little worn out today, but like we said, perpetual Monday, but lots of good stuff happening, and I'm really glad to be here with you ladies.
Well, thank you for taking the time to come hang out with us and chat with us a little bit.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. So I met Sarah many years ago in ceremony, and we do lots and lots of work together. In fact, two of the panels I've done this month also had Sarah on them. So we've had a really busy month.
Yeah.
So what panels are you guys on together?
I guess these were both Native American Heritage Month.
Yeah, so we went to WinStar to Thackerville, Oklahoma.
Where there is nothing but a casino.
Nothing but a casino, and the world's largest casino, WinStar. So we were there for, it was actually a really keen event.
VAWA, that's right.
Chickasaws put on a really cool VAWA connection between community and tribal law and governance, and kind of where all of those intersections meet. And Summer, Kendra, and I did a panel on kind of what is the impact on our community with this legislation, and how does it actually work out in a community.
So what is the legislation for people who don't know?
Yeah, Summer, you're better at this than I am.
The Violence Against Women's Act.
And we have talked about
Right,
this
we've talked about
bit,
that.
yeah.
And Kendra's actually been on the podcast before as well. But VAWA had the 2013 reauthorization of VAWA had some tribal provisions that allows tribes or nations, I'm sorry, I'm trying to get better at using the correct terminology, has some provisions that allow nations to prosecute non-natives for specific offenses within VAWA, which is domestic violence, sexual assault, stalking, but those are only within the confines of of domestic violence. So it's not all rape cases, it's not all stalking, it's only between current or former intimate partners. So we had to do some education on that.
And we talked more about how this plays out in women's lives. You know, what does this look like? What are we seeing in Matriarch with our women? What are things that are actually working to help preventative measures and healing trauma? You know, what's the fallout for our community, and what's it look like, and how are we doing it best, and what is really not working? And so that was kind of where they engaged us and said, we have lots of attorneys here, we have lots of people who are, you know, even I saw people there who were like law enforcement, which I was really glad to see, which is we usually don't see that at these conferences. It's usually like attorneys, but there is a huge piece that involves law enforcement and how do they enforce or not what's happening, and there's a huge gap there. So I was really glad to see that tie in. But that was one of the panels, and then we did another one at the library, downtown library, about it was varied. Like, we talked about a lot of stuff.
It was basically what we
refer
to as Indian 101.
Yeah, it really was.
It was what?
Indian 101.
So we talked about VAWA, we talked about ICWA, we talked about indigenizing education, we talked about water rights, we talked about
what else? There was a whole list of topics.
And we went everywhere with those intersections too. We talked about mascots, so
representation, appropriation.
Well, I think that's great. I mean, like, I am not part of a tribe, and so, you know, we have these podcasts, and I always learn something new. So I'm probably the best one to ask questions, because I'm like, you two seem to speak the same language, and I'm like, what is that?
And we talk about it so often, I think we forget sometimes that it's not everybody understands the terminology that become terms of art.
Right. Yeah. You've used you said, well, we went through ceremony together. Well, I don't know what that is. Like, why? You know, what is that specifically? What does that entail?
We met at a sweat
lodge. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we met at a sweat. How many years ago?
2012?
500?
2012, I believe.
500. So,
it was
500
years
years
ago.
Also known
we
as
met.
6.
I don't math.
Right. It feels like it's been longer than that.
It does. That's because we've been working that entire time.
Yeah, I think it was one of those cool things where, you know, you meet, and Indian country's small. It's definitely one
So
of those things
small.
where, but when you find that sisterhood and those people, and things just click and work, and you do speak that same language, and it just kind of works. Those are, for me, the places that you have to just be grateful for and go with it, because I think that timing is incredibly important, and we can't get the job done without everybody, right? So Summer does things that I have absolutely no idea about. I mean, I know about them, but I'm not good at them, and vice versa. And so we have this.
She's way better at peopling than me. I cannot network like she can.
It is, and that's kind of the beauty of it, right? Is
Yeah.
we all just kind of fill in the gaps, and we do it in a way that honors each other and each other's knowledge and place, and it is way easier to do revolution movement building when you have a whole bunch of sisters around you for healing, for support, to encourage them.
Well, hell yeah.
Oh,
I mean, your
God.
ladies are everything.
I don't know how
Yes,
anybody does
everything.
it without it,
I
quite
don't
honestly.
know.
I'd be in a fetal position rocking back and forth.
Yeah, no, I couldn't live this life without my ladies.
No,
Mhm.
I don't know.
I need their support.
Yes.
So what is it that you do?
So my 9 to 5, I work for my parents' company, Redland Sheet Metal. We are a custom fabrication sheet metal company in South Oklahoma City. So we do stainless steel countertops and cabinets and backsplash and industrial and a little bit of residential. So that's what I do, and I do a lot of like paperwork basically, and seeping into the financial bookkeeping end, which is like,
I'm sorry.
oh my, yes, and into project management. So I'm starting to bid jobs, things like that. So I'm using math for like the first time in my life, which is amazing. But then outside of that, I do a lot of things actually. I'm one of the co-founders of Matriarch. You guys met Kendra, who's incredible, and she's kind of the other half of this, the other co-founder. So that takes a lot of my time, and Matriarch is an intertribal Native women's organization, now a nonprofit. That's really, we are a support organization, and we empower each other, and we do trauma healing, and we do that twice a month in Tulsa and in Oklahoma City. And I'm also the vice president of the board for Sovereign Community School, and that's a new charter school in Oklahoma City to indigenize education and turn around a lot of the abysmal graduation rates we have for Native kids in Oklahoma City, which is 59%.
Wow.
And that's a huge thing that we're doing a lot of work on right now. I'm the vice president of the board at the ACLU of Oklahoma.
Oh, wow.
I do work with Not Your Mascots, doing work with, it's horrible. Like, I need to bring this stuff and put it in front of me.
I know.
You're going to have to edit
we
this
need a running
out.
list.
Yeah, because then I'm going to get in trouble. They're like,
do I even have your
you
last
didn't,
bio? I don't
mention
know.
this. I also have stage 4 cirrhosis, which means that I forget things pretty often. It's a real thing. Toxins build up in your body, and your memory is impacted. So this is the downfall of my cirrhosis, my diagnosis. But a lot of really exciting, good things that are going on, and most of it really centers around indigenizing spaces and women and children. So if you had to whoosh, that would be it.
That's your focus.
That's it.
Yeah.
That's what I do.
Well, I approve.
Two-Spirit
That's
Society.
awesome.
Oh, yes. I'm a part of Central Oklahoma Two-Spirit Society, and what's the other one? If you're all scroll.
I know, I'm looking, this isn't
Doesn't
old.
matter.
This
You guys can
bio's
add it
2
in.
years old. I don't know.
Yeah.
what to tell you.
It's totally cool. We'll figure it out later. No big deal.
And you have a couple children and all this.
Oh,
too,
yes,
that you
I do
take
have
care of.
children. Yes. I have 2 daughters who are incredible and really drive my work. I would say, live Indigenous OK.
Oh, okay. We are both on this board and we both forgot it. I'm so sorry.
Okay, so yeah, I am the founder of an organization called Live Indigenous OK, and it is not a nonprofit, so it really is a community grassroots organization. We recently got Indigenous Peoples Day recognized in Oklahoma City, and so that was
that was you,
or that was our group. It was definitely not just me.
Sure.
Yeah,
And
sure.
thank you, Mayor Holt.
Yes, thank you, Mayor Holt. That was an incredible, and I'd love to talk about that at some point because we really haven't.
Well, let's talk about it.
Go ahead.
do it.
Go right ahead.
It was the most different experience. It's polar opposite interactions that we had with city government prior. He was incredible. He actually asked us our opinion on issues happening in the city. He is Osage, which I think had a whole lot to do with it. He also is young and he is inclusive, and it was just completely different. I felt like I was listened to.
Yes, and it's not just with our community either. I've
Right.
noticed him.
Wait,
with,
a politician
yes,
listened to you?
Mayor Holt.
And
Yes,
asked us questions and then listened.
Right.
You know, there's the kicker.
Wow.
Right.
And then he did something?
and he
And
did
then he did
something too.
something.
that
Yeah.
you
was
wanted
great.
him to do?
Right?
Yes.
And not for money.
No.
It was amazing. I
Huh.
know. Because
It-
my girls took part in the the sit-in reenactment, the 50th anniversary of the Clara Looper sit-ins, and he was there for that too. And he spoke. He actually got visibly emotional in speaking
Wow.
about what Oklahoma
And
City
shouldn't
still
we be
needs to
emotional
do
about that?
as far as
Mhm.
becoming more inclusive and listening to marginalized communities about what we need. And I've heard him on a few occasions talk about that, how he
Yes.
reaches out to community members that he knows to get feedback instead of just making decisions, assuming what they need. So
Mhm. It
we
was
need more
very
of
different.
those
We need
people in
lots
office.
of David Holtz.
Yes.
And
Can we clone him? Is that possible?
I know, right? And the thing is that what I love is that he's a Republican. So this is changing how I feel about Republicans somewhat. Not all Republicans, but it has not been my experience to have to be able to communicate on this level with somebody who sits under a different flag, so to speak.
Right.
So
Right.
it has really given me the opportunity to reevaluate and say, okay, we can find bridges, we can find things we agree on, and find more inclusion for communities of color and oppressed communities in Oklahoma City. Hopefully he'll run for, governor. Wouldn't that be keen?
Maybe, yeah.
Anyway,
If he wants
so
to do that. So contrast that. Tell her how
To-
the council for 3 or 4 years.
it makes my eye
3 years.
twitch
Yes.
to talk about this. Yeah. It was horrendous.
What was it?
So we took Indigenous Peoples Day to Oklahoma City City Council 4 years ago, and we thought it was going to be really easy, low-hanging fruit, right? Like, so
Should
the
be.
city doesn't actually recognize Columbus Day. So this was really just an addition, just to say, hey, we're recognizing Indigenous Peoples Day on the second Monday in October. This should be easy. It was not. So we were met
Okay.
with all kinds of rhetoric from, there was a really great guy who really assimilated into, the culture, and you guys should
be
do
more like
that. And we're just not ready for this type of thing. All the way to,
You
well,
have
if
rhetoric.
you want
Isn't
it.
that enough?
Yes. And, well, if we do this for you, then every, group is going to want their day. And I was like, well, that's okay, right?
Let's
Let them have their day.
Right?
What's
We're
wrong
the
with
White
that?
People's Day, so-
Exactly.
We were also told we would be taken more seriously if we had more men speaking
Yep.
for us.
Are you
Yep.
fucking kidding me? They
No,
actually said that?
no.
Yes, there's actually
Well,
an
they
editorial
said that they
online somewhere I wrote
noted
about that.
the fact that there were no men with us. And,
So fucking what?
right?
Right, so we had to go
That
to the
pisses
men
me
and
off.
ask
Yeah.
them, and they're like, okay, we'll do it, but it shouldn't be necessary.
Right.
That
But okay.
irritates me.
Yeah.
And we did actually have men working with us. They just weren't the leads.
Right.
Oh,
And so,
gosh.
yeah,
I mean,
crazy.
how did your
Well-
tiny little female brain handle all those big questions?
I know.
though.
It's incredible that, our husbands let us come and,
They
take
let
part.
us out of the house.
Did
Right.
they let you wear pants instead of skirts too?
Right? And the fact that Oklahoma City City Council just doesn't represent, they do not look like what Oklahoma City looks like. They
Not
have
at
one
all.
They
woman
don't.
on council who voted against us, by the
Yes,
way.
she did.
And we just have a lot of people, like there is a person who represents South Oklahoma City who is an old white man, and South Oklahoma City is very dominantly Hispanic,
Mm-hmm.
and they need someone who represents their community and
Yeah.
not someone who has just, and I think he's been sitting in that seat for like,
A long time. I don't know
yeah,
how long.
a long time. I think he's the longest sitting council person, but nevertheless, we encountered a lot of, I would say, bigotry, patriarchal.
Mm-hmm.
I don't even know what to call it.
Male toxic energy.
All
And
of it.
even, do you remember being in that room? And I remember looking up, and I looked up at the ceiling, and they had these light
Yes,
fixtures.
I tweeted those photos of
Did
the light
you?
fixture. I'm like,
And they have like
seriously,
Indians with like headdresses
Yeah.
on them, and I was like, this is so Oklahoma, where we will they want the dancers, they want the music, they want the feathers, they do not want the actual people,
Right.
like contemporary Indigenous
No,
people.
they just want to. They love us when they want us to dance for them and entertain them, but not
And
otherwise.
otherwise, see you later.
Mhm.
So that was kind of what we encountered for the first 2 years. The third year we didn't go before them because we knew that the makeup had not changed enough. We were gonna. I don't like to be my head against a wall, so. We were like, we're gonna sit this one out,
And we consulted. We had a public meeting of
we did.
Oklahoma
Yeah.
City.
Oh, it was very
Indigenous
intentional.
Community,
Yeah.
and that was the consensus. I think it was unanimous. Actually, I don't think there were any
Yeah.
detractors that said wait.
Yeah, let's
So-
do it again. So and we
didn't do
knew,
anything.
but we knew the election was coming up.
Yes.
And so we used our time to go meet with those candidates and say, how do you feel about Indigenous Peoples Day? How would you vote? And actually, everybody we talked to said that they would vote for it. And so, but Mayor Holt seemed a lot more willing to sit down and have open conversation with us. It was less about getting our votes and more about inclusion and making good decisions for the city. So that was kind of how that happened. We got it passed. We'd been working on it with him in his office for probably 4 or 5 months before October. Got it passed, had a resolution reading at Oklahoma City University on second Monday in October, which was like the 8th or the 10th. And then we had a panel that day. We are super excited. He said the entire time he is mayor, we will always have Indigenous Peoples Day. And we were like, did y'all all hear that?
Right.
Everybody
He
heard
said
it?
in public in
That's
front of
right.
everybody.
And I
In front of
believe
the
that,
news cameras.
and I trust him. And I think that's the first time I've ever said that. I trust a politician, but I trust him. I do.
Don't mess this up.
Yeah. And I feel good about him. So I also feel like if we had an issue, we could call his office and talk to him about it. That's a little bit about Live Indigenous OK. We have thought about getting together, and this was the reason we put this group together, but there are a million other things that need to be addressed.
Sure.
We want to be a little more policy driven. We want to kind of be the organization that knows about legislation, or even right now, I think we're about to be at the deadline for state legislators who they have a deadline to submit bills to catch that and say, okay, what's coming down the pike? Which ones are really going to be impacting Indigenous families? Let's talk about those, and let's help advocate and inform, educate our community about those. So you might see more from us about things like that.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, you are a busy lady.
I think we're all busy though.
Nonstop.
I know that it's a lot of stuff that's kind of more public, but I really don't see myself as more busy than anybody. I think everybody's kind of doing, working, sometimes more in silos, but it's all important work, whether you're, making sure that your kid is getting their homework done, or whether you take that extra 10 minutes to make sure that you're taking care of yourself. We're all struggling to meet the needs of our families and our community and ourselves. and ourselves always come last, unfortunately. But I'm trying to get better at that.
Oh yeah, no.
The worst.
I mean, there's nothing to pour from the cup if it's empty.
Absolutely.
You know, and
mine is bone dry, baby.
I am so awful about taking care of myself. I wait till I collapse and then like, oh yeah.
And then we go, why are we sick?
Right.
Why am I sick? Why do I have these? Why can't I kick this thing? And it's like, because you've been working 18 hours a day.
Yeah. I was in bed all day yesterday because I was so sick because, I spent the last 3 days in DC, and before that I was doing everything else, and I just finally collapsed yesterday.
How was DC?
It was good.
Yeah, tell us a little bit about it.
I went and spoke. I gave a diversity and inclusion training for the Bureau of Land Management.
Okay, that to me, I'm like, you're in the pit.
I was a little concerned about how some of the things I had to say were going to be received, but I say them with a sweet smile, so what are you going to do?
Right. They already made the checkout, so.
Actually, they don't. You have to invoice after the fact, but
Okay.
but I had a signed contract, so.
There you go.
It was received better than I expected. So it was pretty good. That was the best group I have ever spoken to as far as asking questions.
Really?
You know how you usually get 3, maybe 4 questions? Almost everybody in the room had something to talk about. It was really awesome.
I love that
interaction.
So give me some highlights.
I gave my presentation, which what they had requested was Native contributions to American society. I know.
Wow.
I said the same
so
thing.
loaded. I'm like,
whoa.
Yes.
Is this a joke?
Whoa.
Right.
How about the land that you live on, for one?
Well,
and it's coming from land management,
right?
right?
Oh my God. The
and
tell us about what you've done for us.
For us, right? So, I took some liberties with that topic. I did start with, first of all, defining what Native is and the government-to-government relationship, and also acknowledging whose land we were on in DC, and then we kind of profiled some people who have contributed to U.S. society, although not necessarily in the ways that they expected. Some were. I mean, there was important people in arts and sports and what have you, but there was also policy. Louise Cobell was brought up, which everybody in the room knew that because Bureau of Land Management, and that's it's the largest settlement in U.S. history. The U.S. government had mismanaged trust funds for land that is held in trust for natives, and were not paying the natives what they were entitled to.
Surprising.
Right, and so she actually worked for almost a decade trying to make reforms before she finally sued. And because she wasn't able to, they finally filed a class action lawsuit and did win. And so
the settlement was like, how many?
I don't know. I have my notes here, but it was billions of dollars. It was billions.
Like the biggest.
It's the biggest
ever.
in U.S. history.
And so, what reaction did you get?
That one they were kind of silent on. There wasn't the head nods like in some of the others, but everybody kind of got it. And I'm like, this is a contribution because it does create a balance on the U.S. government that they have to, because there is not a single politician that we have talked to lobbying who does not know about that, that settlement. So they really do understand that, and it is a more pressure to do what you're supposed to do your job right. And I also talked about baby Veronica and ICWA and all the ways that case has affected things, because it's not just ICWA. It is,
ICWA, Indian Child Welfare Act.
Right, Indian Child Welfare Act, which we did an episode on recently with Jonna. And it also exposed a lot of corruption in the adoption industry, and also how rights are stripped from unmarried fathers and military fathers, so that and their children are placed for adoption against their wishes. So I included a lot of stuff in there.
Good for you.
That they weren't expecting. John Trudell made it in there, which is probably the most controversial person I talked about. I even gave his quotes about the FBI declaring war on him and other AIM leaders. But
so what's his controversy?
Well, he first became known because he was the spokesperson for the national spokesman for the Alcatraz occupation in what year was that? 73?
I don't know the year.
It was before I was born. Gets fuzzy when it was before I was born. But anyhow, he was the the national spokesperson for that. And then, of course, the American Indian Movement came out of that after it wound down, and they were pretty well hunted down by the FBI. There is a 17,000-page FBI file on just him.
Oh, wow.
And then...
Brilliant poet.
Right, and how he became a poet.
Activist.
And how he became a poet was there was a suspicious fire at his home on the res that killed his wife, his children, and her mother.
Oh, wow.
And the FBI refused to investigate. And he believed that it was done by them, or at the very least enabled by them, in reaction to a demonstration he had done in which he did burn an American flag 12 hours before the fire happened at his home. And that's actually how he became a poet. He went into basically isolated himself entirely and then the words just started pouring out of him, and he became an absolutely brilliant poet. Mm-hmm. And his work and his words have inspired so many, whether it's community organizers or artists. I've seen his work incorporated in the art of so many others. So
he's an important person. Anybody in Indian country knows who he is and knows his impact on I feel like his words have really shaped advocacy and activism in our contemporary times.
Absolutely.
I mean, from his time forward, I think there's so much of his, not just his views, but the way that he chose to act on them, and the way that he spoke them, and the power that people feel from just how much he loves his people, like that. And I think that a lot of times AIM and some of these groups get such a bad rap. I mean, I think it's the same for organizations like the Black Panthers. They were a community organization feeding kids.
They were feeding people. They were making...
Right?
Yeah.
Like, that was a big part of who they were. And most of those movements have always been villainized and made into... and you can even argue that for the LGBTQ community. Early on, they talked about them as pedophiles, as, criminals.
Sure. And you're still seeing that rhetoric, really.
Sure. Well, I mean, the bathroom thing, right? Like,
right.
They're going to molest your children in there. And it's like, people of color or oppressed people have been villainized, and their movements,
Sure.
So that
it's a way to silence.
The larger society will always view them as criminals, which helps perpetuate the racism and the oppression. So, yeah.
Well, I'm glad you threw some things into your speech that they weren't expecting. What kind of questions did you get?
I got a lot of the typical questions, how can we hold people accountable in our own lives, which is pretty standard, and nobody ever wants the answer to, because it's like you've got to stand up to the people you care about, whether they like it or not. And nobody likes that answer. They want a magic solution that's going to get them off the hook and them not have to be uncomfortable, which never works. Then I also got the the standard questions that we love, which I posted a photo of my son took where I'm giving the side eye to somebody. Like, really? Because it was would the mascots be okay if it was a Native person dressing up, or isn't that at least more accurate if the Boy Scouts are putting the headdress on a Native person? I'm like, thank you for missing the point. Right. There was a couple who asked about me, which is I'm not used to. I'm used to people wanting to talk about the topic and not myself. So that was a little odd.
What they want to know about you, Summer?
The first one was just wanted to know about me in general, because unlike most places, they didn't do well, you know how normally when they introduce you, they do a bio, right? Yeah. Well, they didn't at this, so that was the first time, and
that's weird.
It was
going to talk like that,
right? And I didn't think about it. I didn't realize until after the fact. And his question was, you've developed the story really well for other people, but who are you? So I had to give kind of my background and stuff, and then there was this one. Really nice woman who she kept staring at her phone, and I'm like, what is she doing? She was on my website, like reading my CV and everything. And she's like, I'm on your website right now, and she said you're well on your way to leaving a an incredible legacy, but what is it you want to be known as when you're gone? That was the hardest question I have ever
I bet you're like,
Yes, I was like, well,
what do you want to be?
Yeah,
well,
Summer.
the thing is, I don't really care if people remember my name. I just want the work that I've put in to continue, and with the movement, the momentum in all these movements that we work on to continue. Because ideally, if we've done our jobs in the way that we hope we're doing our jobs, when we're gone, there's not going to be a void that they're missing us, because other people have already filled that in and be doing even bigger and better things than we could ever conceive of.
So it's about building the momentum now.
Right.
It's about sustainability.
Right.
Yeah.
The life that we've put into
what
this
we
continue to grow.
Which means also that we have built on what our ancestors have placed for us. So it's not that we didn't also benefit from that trajectory.
Absolutely.
The work
and the
that came before you.
Yeah, because we wouldn't be here if it weren't for people before us who had, we incrementally make it better all the time, usually. With momentary,
as long as we keep
whiplash,
going.
Right, yeah.
Two steps forward, one step back.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's the way it is, though. And I think it's important that we continue to push the envelope, because and that's a really interesting conversation about like activism in general. Is there are so many different ways and modes to do it, right? Some of them are like super hardcore, like militant, and then there are others who are more policy driven. They, like taking 20 years for a little bitty change. Then there are others who do like more grassroots stuff. So there's so many different ways, and everybody thinks there's a right way. Well, I feel like you have to use them all, because the people who are really driving it hardcore, they get us further down the line, but the policy people are really good because they make it sustainable, long-term law. And then the grassroots people are the people who keep it working and going all the time, the people you never see.
I feel like they're all pieces of the puzzle.
You have
need
to.
them all.
You do.
And it is a beautiful thing when you can strategically work them to where it's pushing together.
And they're not working against each other.
That
hard.
happens.
Oh, man.
Because sometimes it's easy to say, okay, I want to go scream about this, but then have no strategic plan for how that's going to happen and result.
Or how it'll backlash other movements when you do that.
And so you have to be strategic, and that's one thing that I think is really easy to not think about. And
well, I have a question.
So it gets really fun.
This is maybe a dumb question, but
no dumb questions.
How do some of the movements that you guys are involved in with the tribal work coincide with like the women's movement, or like when we had the teacher walkout? Like, do you have a presence at those things and work with people? What's been your experience? Will you have a special presence at the Women's March in January?
She was at the last Women's March.
Yeah.
So I was at the one in DC, the first one that I was part of. They invited an Indigenous organization, Indigenous Women Rise, invited Indigenous women from all over the U.S., well, in Canada too, to come in and be a part of their march. And so there were meetings that were held ahead of time to really, pull everybody together. So we were a part of that. And then we had a delegation, and the other co-founder, Kendra, spoke at the first Oklahoma City Women's March. And then I helped, I was one of the lead organizers for the Oklahoma City March, and then I'm helping again this year to organize.
We need to talk.
Yeah,
yes.
She has ideas too.
Okay,
we need
good.
to talk.
Okay. And it's all women of color. Like the leadership is all women of color.
We need to talk.
It's all very intentional too,
Yes.
because the pussy hat movement and all of the things that
Hell yeah.
it for me it's super difficult because it was from a very white perspective and transphobic in some ways too. It was just not inclusionary, and so sometimes there are ways for us to build that solidarity and that movement in a way that maybe looks a little different than what the initial Women's March may have anticipated. And as it should. We should evolve our movement, right?
It can look, if that's what works for one group, that's fine. Other groups can also have something that's representative for them.
I think it's important for us to always remember that our perspective on one thing is not everybody's, and be willing to listen and grow and change things.
Mm-hmm.
And issues are going to evolve too, and we've got to be willing to change our tactical approach with that as well, and not get defensive and
and there's
blow
room
things
for
apart.
defensiveness. There's room for all of it. There's room because with that defensiveness or that dissent comes growth. It opens opportunities for us to have conversations that can then go, okay, well, how do we do it better? How are we gonna?
Well, when I say defensive, I mean the defensive type where you shut down and you don't listen and you're not willing to try to find that growth.
So I'm helping with the Women's March this time. It's happening. We had a meeting on Thursday, to talk about, how all of that was logistics, and it's a shit ton of work. It's a lot of work.
I'm sure. Yeah. It's not going to be on the same day as the National March.
Yeah.
And why is that?
Well, there are a lot of people who want to go to the National March, and so for us to be.
That happened last time too, right? People had to decide.
Yeah, they were on the same day last time.
Right, that's what I'm saying.
So
and
it
wanted
just
to avoid that.
Right, and there was a lot of some of our leadership too is supposed to be a part of that national walk, but needs to be back here for this one too. And so we had we decided to do two different to have it on a different day, so that was a possibility.
I had a friend who's pretty active, and she was very upset that it's going to be on a different day because she and I wasn't at the last one. I was out of town doing something, but the one before that I was at, and I brought my daughter, and it felt I get her point. Like she said that it felt like the fact that it was happening all over the nation on the same day that we were all unified together and felt like a bigger part of it. And so what would you say to someone who feels like, they're losing some of that momentum or that that feeling of unity by having the event on a different day?
I'd say you're missing the whole point. The whole point, there's not one day. I mean, yes, there is there is. I understand the feeling to want to do it on the same day with everybody else. I also think we have this mentality that there's one day and that's the only day we're going to get together and the only day we're going to talk about this and have this work done. And by diversifying it, by changing it up, by making sure that we're doing it well and right in the confines that we can is more important than having it on a particular day. So what we've talked about doing is having making sure that we have more ways to plug in at this march. So before it was like, we're going to listen to these incredible speakers. We're going to have a little bit of like, here are a few ways to get involved. This time we're going to have like breakout sessions where you go to 2 different sessions and you can pick 2 and there'll be maybe like 6 offerings to plug into different communities. That's and say,
like
learn more. Let's not just rah and hit, leave. This has to be continued organizing, movement building.
Work.
You cannot be there one day and then be done. And I think for a lot of people that go to these, they want that kind of opportunity absolutely. To like plug in and follow.
Like what can I keep doing to keep the momentum going?
Exactly.
Yeah, I agree.
So I would say that the importance of just one day is not what we should be focusing on. Like there are so many other things that are more important than doing it on that Saturday.
No, I get that. I think there may be a misconception that the only reason it's not on the same day is because a handful of people want to do both. And that doesn't feel, for everybody else who wants to be a part of it, but there's obviously more reasons than having it just on.
And I would say the people who want to go do both are doing the majority of the lifting in Oklahoma, and they should have also the place to say, well, if I'm going to organize this whole thing, then we have to make sure that it works with everything I'm doing too. We've not had a lot of heavy lifters in Oklahoma to do the work, and it has been on the backs of women of color.
People.
Well, there are people who want to help. I mean, I know that for sure. So I think part of maybe one of the groups you can have is, who wants to help step up in leadership for this going forward, because I know there are people who want to do more, want to be a part of, having a say on how things, our
everybody
plan
wants a say for how things are planned. Not everybody wants to do the work.
And
no,
we need
and
that.
I don't just mean having a say. I mean, there are people who are willing to do the work, that want to be involved and are asking to be involved. So I hope that it can help grow.
Yeah,
I hope so, because it does. We do need more people putting in work and organizing. Because I see the same handful of people at every event and across communities. They're working, and I'm like, there's so many people. It shouldn't be left to this small group of people to kill themselves to push things forward. So hopefully people will start.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Coming on board and helping do things, doing the work.
Yeah, I've seen some of the lashback on it too, and some of it's just freaking ugly, and I just want to go.
Lashback, like what?
About the date. I'm just like, seriously, we're going to argue about the date? Like, that's what we have policy coming at us to make it illegal for people to get an abortion. Like, we're going to talk about
life in prison. Life in prison. Like in Oklahoma, that's the bill that's been put forward by Silk.
Oh, I know.
It just, it's just hard to, like, I don't know. I think this is also a hard part of movement building is like the dissent that happens within groups, the fractioning that happens in these movements. We get caught up in things that take our energy away from things that are incredibly important. And that's hard. That's tough for me. It gets me to a place where I'm like, is it worth it? Like I don't want to spin my wheels. My very least favorite thing is to have my time or waste somebody else's time.
Sure.
It's like there's too much work to do. I'm not interested in infighting.
Right.
Sure. Yeah. No, we do have too much work to do.
There's so much. I feel like, and I feel like, the last couple of years have been even harder.
Yeah, but I think we've made a lot of progress. Like, there's a lot of progress, I'd say, for the Indigenous community. Things that have happened in Oklahoma City, getting Sovereign Community School passed this year, seeing Indigenous Peoples Day passed this year. Within the last few years, we saw the exit of a Native mascot from one of our schools. Yay. So we've seen a lot,
some steps forward.
Some steps forward, absolutely, that keep us in a place to go, okay, what's next? What do we need to do next? How do we do this equity work in a way that's big picture, long term, not just like, okay, well, we passed that hurdle, we're done.
Right. The work's never going to be done.
I wish it would be. I'd love to be out of a job.
For it to
let's
be.
Retire.
Won't happen in our lifetime.
Yeah, absolutely.
So can you tell us a little about Sovereign Community School? Because I'm super excited about this. Tell us what the curriculum is going to be like.
I'm so excited
what
about
are we
Sovereign.
Doing here?
Yes. So Sovereign Community School is a charter school that was recently approved by the State Board of Education after being turned down by Oklahoma City Public Schools twice.
Yes.
We are super excited about it because it's going to indigenize education and bring us to a place that serves a community of people who have been pretty left out in a lot of ways. We're failing our kids in a classroom a lot with specifically with this westernized concept of education. So it doesn't work for everybody. The same model that we've had forever is not serving our kids, and it shows in the fact that we're graduating 59% of our Native kids in Oklahoma City Public Schools. So this school there are 4 different pillars that we're making sure that we're going to produce and provide for our community, and those were all driven by the community. So normally the way education works, there's a school in a neighborhood, right, and your kids just go to that school and you adapt to the school. And this school,
it doesn't always work.
Oh no!
I have moved 4 times trying to find a school
exactly.
that works.
Oh my God!
Yeah.
And so this school is very different in that we went to the community and said, "What do you want? What in your perfect scenario? What kind of school do you need?" And initially, what was difficult is our parents and community members could only tell us what they didn't want. Mm-hmm. And so that, I think, was a very important mindset to understand that we've been on the defense so long of going,
please stop doing that. Please stop doing that.
Like, don't stop doing this to our kids. Don't do this. That we had a hard time dreaming about what we do want. But I'd say about this second, third conversation, we were well on our way to go, okay, what's the dream? What's the dream for our kids and our community? And so we landed on 4 major things. Wellness was huge. We have a high rate of our Native kids who are experiencing mental crisis of some kind, cutting, suicide attempts, anxiety, depression, and all the things that go with that. So they wanted to see a class where they're going every day where they talk about wellness, relational wellness, educational wellness, mental, physical wellness.
That's great.
Huge. And it really rose to the top. I'd say that might have been our number one out of everything. They want rigorous education, obviously. So we have a small percentage of Native kids who go to college, but then a lot of those kids drop out of college. They don't actually make it through. So we want to see that happen, which means making sure that we don't just educate them for those tests, but life skills.
We're going to keep them eligible to play ball.
Right. They also want to see Indigenized education. So most people think, oh, Indigenous education, that's history and art. It's like, no.
Because we only exist.
Right, in those 2 bubbles, right. So, like, while, our ancestors had star charts that could tell you exactly how to get from A to B, everybody else thought the world was flat. You know what I mean? Like, we had sophisticated
entire
systems.
Cities that were built on lunar
right,
on the sun and moon alignments. Like, they were built on planetary alignments that we don't even know how to track.
Exactly. And so much of our knowledge now is based on that Indigenous knowledge.
Yes.
It's just not recognized. And so we want to indigenize education, and then at that point our families talked a whole lot about making sure that it was an intertribal inclusive place. So in some states there would be 3 or 4 places that would be they would have 3 or 4 big tribes. Oklahoma City serves somewhere between 70 and 80 tribes. So it's like, how do you teach which language are you going to teach? How are you going to, what do you focus? It's a lot. But it offers a lot of really great opportunities as well, that intertribal atmosphere. And so those are the things that it's really based on. We are wrapping up our principal search, which is huge, and I'm so excited about
to hear the outcome.
I'm so excited. It's going to be great. We have phenomenal applicants. And so we'll be wrapping that up within the next couple of weeks. We'll make announcements. We have a community gathering on December, it's like 19th. Let me see. And that is open to everyone. Yes, Wednesday, December 19th.
If there's an event, let us know and we can put it on the podcast.
Sure.
So that people can link
Absolutely.
to it. Yeah.
Muskogee Creek Center in Oklahoma City, and it's from 6 to 8 on December 19th. And
Awesome.
It's for any community members. We're gonna have, we're gonna feed everybody like we do,
we always do.
and In Country Eats, and then we're gonna have giveaways and just lots of opportunities to just celebrate and find out who our new founding principal is.
Yes,
So,
I can't wait. I want to find out.
It'll be good.
And then I'm going to need more information about the other positions that will be coming up.
We'll start hiring teachers after that, which is huge.
That's so great.
Yeah,
Well,
we're really
cool.
excited.
Well, do we want to give any, do you want to give a shout out to any specific organization? You're involved in so many, but maybe give us the best places to find information on the organizations that you're involved in.
Absolutely. So Sovereign Community School has a website. If you just Google Sovereign Community School, you'll find us.
Okay.
We have a Facebook page as well.
Okay.
Live Indigenous OK has a Facebook page.
And Twitter.
And Twitter. Thank you, Summer, for holding that down, because I do not know the Twitterverse. And then Matriarch has a Facebook page, and we will have a website soon.
Okay.
And we have, for any Indigenous women who want to plug in and find some time to be with other Indigenous sisters, we have 4 classes during the year that they're open for other Indigenous women to attend. So if you go to Facebook, you'll see those dates.
And
Lots of
it's
fun
what,
stuff.
Matriarch OK?
Matriarch OK, yes.
Matriarch OK.
Yeah, so we've got that going on. Central Oklahoma Two-Spirit Society has a Facebook page as well. ACLU of Oklahoma is rolling out some really great stuff they're always, really digging into the latest and greatest that's around the bend for our legislature.
And sounds like there'll be some interesting stuff for the Women's March too. I'm excited. Whatever day it's on, I'm excited.
Yeah, it's gonna be good. I'm really excited for it too. I'm less involved with it this year. I've got some health concerns and some family concerns that I'm taking care of. So
got to take care of yourself first.
We do, and that's hard to say no and cut back, but it's important.
Would you be willing to talk about that for just a second?
Sure.
And explain, because I know when you say cirrhosis, and you know this like as well as I do, the first thing people think is alcohol.
Mm-hmm.
And so I would like to get out there that is not the only way this happens, and we need to start to be taking care of ourselves.
Yeah, so my diagnosis, stage 4 cirrhosis, happened this summer. And I really didn't find out about it. I didn't have any symptoms because cirrhosis really doesn't present until you're in kidney failure. But I had gallbladder issues. They were removing my gallbladder, saw that my liver was enlarged, sent a biopsy off, and came back and they were like, yeah, so it's stage 4. I'm like, yeah. Mine was induced by fatty liver disease. So I've never been a big drinker. And so that's not where this came from. Mine was from not getting enough activity and not eating all the foods that I need to eat to be healthy. So the first thing they did was put me on a diet and exercise plan. So I've lost about 30 pounds so far, which will shrink the size of my liver, which will reduce the scarring. And cirrhosis basically is the scarring of your liver. And your liver acts as a sponge for all your blood to filter through to take all the bad stuff out. Well, if it's scarred, the blood can't get through. So I have about a 50% functioning liver. Toxins build up in your body. It's not super fun. You have a lot of memory loss kind of stuff happening. Feel more tired, fatigue. It definitely lowers your life expectancy, so that sucks. And there's nothing I can really do about that because it's stage 4 at this point. Right. But I can keep it from going any further, which means maybe I don't have to have a transplant. But it just means that I have to be a lot better to myself and start saying no to some things.
Yeah, and that's hard for women like
us. I'm struggling.
It is difficult, but it's also important. It's almost like forcing me to go. You have to say no. You have to, I put on my calendar for workout days with little hearts beside them to try to talk myself in to be like,
love yourself.
Yes, I know. Yes. I'm like,
self-care is a form of self-love for sure.
It is.
Well, thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedule to spend it with us.
I'm glad to do it. It was really fun. Thank you, ladies, for offering this space.
Yeah.
You can contact the podcast at brokebrokenpodcast@gmail.com. The Broken Podcast can be found on Twitter at Broke Broken Show, on Instagram and Facebook at Broke Broken Podcast.